Children may be dismissed to go to children's church. If you're a visitor and you want to keep your children in here, that's perfectly all right. Today's scripture is one of the greatest stories in the Bible. Just before this, we saw that Jesus, after the Feast of Dedication, which is now called Hanukkah, went to the east about 15 miles across the Jordan River. He went to the place where John had been baptizing in his early days. Many people came to Jesus there over some period of time, and many of them believed. Then his friends Mary and Martha from Bethany sent word to him that his dear friend and their brother Lazarus was gravely ill. And after 2 more days, he went to see him. And when he got there, he found that Lazarus had already been in the tomb 4 days. Now, Bethany was less than 2 miles from Jerusalem, so many Jews had come to Mary and Martha to comfort them in the death of their brother. And when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went out to meet him. She said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. But I know that even now, God will give you whatever you ask." Jesus said, "Your brother will rise again." She said, "Oh, I know he'll rise again at the resurrection in the last day." Jesus said, "I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, even though he dies. And whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Do you believe this?" He said, "Yes, Lord. I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God who was to come into the world." Now, when Martha had said this, she went back and called her sister Mary aside. "The teacher's here, and he's calling for you." So Mary, when she heard this, she got up quickly and went to him. Now, Jesus had not yet entered the village. He was still in the place where Martha had met him. Well, when the Jews who were with Mary in the house, mourning, noticed that she got up and went out quickly, they followed her. They were supposing that she was going to the tomb to mourn there. When Mary came to the place where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet and said, "Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died." And when Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews who came with her weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. "Where have you laid him?" he said. They said, "Lord, come and see." Jesus wept. The Jews said, "See how he loved him." Some said, "Couldn't this man who opened the eyes of the blind man have kept this man from dying?" When Jesus came to the tomb, he was once again deeply moved. It was a cave with a stone laid across the entrance. "Take away the stone," he said. Martha said, "But Lord, by this time there will be a bad odor. He's been in there 4 days." Jesus said, "Didn't I tell you that if you believe, you'll see the glory of God?" So they took away the stone. Jesus looked up, said, "Lord, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I know you always hear me, but I said this for the people here, that they may believe that you sent me." "Lazarus, come out." And the dead man came out. His hands and his feet were wrapped in strips of linen. And there was a cloth around his face. Jesus said, "Take off the grave clothes and let him go."
Let's pray together. Lord God, we come before you in this passage and we declare our inability to understand it very well unless you come and do your work in us. Would you deepen far beyond what we could think or imagine? Would you give us a new vision for who you are? The resurrection and the life. You're our hope, you're our future, you're our present, you're our everything. Give us a glimpse of your glory today. And be with the one that preaches, an unworthy servant, to forgive him his sins. And may we see Jesus, I pray this morning, in your name. Amen. The quote in your bulletin today is from John MacArthur, and it says, "Remember that even Jesus' most scathing denunciation, a blistering diatribe against the religious leaders of Jerusalem in Matthew 23, ends with Christ weeping over Jerusalem. Compassion colored everything he did. He healed diseases. He offered hope. He showed them how they could be born again. He cast out their demons. Even when he was tired and wanted to rest, when the multitude came to him, he had compassion on them, and he ministered to them for days on end. Even knowing that ultimately they would crucify him, his compassion was undaunted as he gave them hope and life. But it seems like compassion is something that's sorely lacking in our world today. I think that too many people are too busy being right to show much compassion at all. You just have to turn on the TV and watch a news channel. Nobody wants to empathize with anybody. So what we find here in our passage today is Jesus' absolute compassion for Martha and for Mary. You've heard the story told about Lazarus, and his sisters are devastated. They are devastated. And when they see Jesus, they say the same thing to him. They both say the same thing to him, but what they each need is something different. Jesus gives each of them something different. He shows his compassion to them in different ways. Well, that's what I want to look at today. The first one is the way that he approaches Martha. So Jesus comes from where he was. He knows that Lazarus is dead, and he comes to the outskirts of the town. We know that from verse 30, a little further down in the passage. We know that he comes to the outskirts of the town, and somehow Martha knows that he's coming, and she meets him there. And what she says to him is, "Lord, if you'd been here, my brother would not have died, but I know that even now God will give you whatever you ask." What is she saying to Jesus? Jesus, you should have been here. We would not be in this predicament if you hadn't been here, but now I know that if you ask God, he will give you whatever you ask, so do something about it. Get the job done. That's how I read it. You may read it differently. Fix it. Not in so many words. She's being respectful and kind, but I think she's saying, Jesus, you weren't here. Why weren't you here? You could have easily been here. We could have avoided this entire catastrophe. And how does Jesus respond? He says, well, your brother will rise again. Well, that's not what she wants to hear. Of course I know he'll rise the last day. I know that. I don't think it was the answer she was looking for at all. How does Jesus respond? Verse 25, I am the resurrection and the life. He who believes in me will live even though he dies, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. Here's what I think Jesus is saying to Martha. Martha, it's not about what I do. It's about who I am. It's not about what I can do for you. It's about who I am and what you believe about me. You don't need your brother to rise from the dead to be okay because you have me. If you're with me, you don't need anything else. You don't need him to be raised. You don't need me to fix the situation. You don't need me to change all of your circumstances. You don't need any of that. You need me. You just need me. I am enough. I'm the resurrection, which means I'm your future. You will rise again, but here it is, Martha. I'm the life. And that life begins right now. It is not some future life, something we look forward to later. Sure, that'll be great, but I come to give you life now, and life more abundantly, as he told us in John 10. Brothers and sisters, how many of us are living lives of fear and anxiety and hoping that our circumstances will change? If only that thing, whatever it is in your life, would change, then I would be okay. How many of you are frustrated because things didn't work out the way you thought they would? Jesus just didn't show up on time. How many of us are frustrated with Christianity because it seems to promise a hope, but that just seems so future? What about right now? I'm living in agony. Or my life isn't going the way I want it to. What about right now? What does this have to do with right now? And this is what Jesus is saying to us. You are focused on the wrong thing. You have no idea what is good for you. You see this much, I see this much. I know the whole thing from the end, from the beginning. You know a minuscule, teeny piece of the pie. How would you know what's good for you? How do you know that what I'm having you go through right now isn't for your absolute very, very best? The only thing you need is me, because I am the one that sees it all. I'm the resurrection. I am the life. You come to me and you will live. Even if you face death, you will live. Why? Because your eyes are on me. Even in the face of challenges, even in the face of adverse circumstances, even when your whole world seems to be falling apart, even through sickness, even through tragedy, even through adversity, even through the things you feel threatened by, even in difficult relationships, come to me and you will live now. Why? Because I take your mind off of your circumstances. If you focus on them, of course you're going to be miserable. But if you know that I have a genius plan for your life, then you can accept it with joy. This is your genius plan to mold me. You have a good plan for me. So how do you do that? Well, you make a list of everything that's on your mind, all of the things that cause you anxiety, all the things that bring you fear, and you cast your cares on him. And then 5 minutes later, when it's all back, you cast your cares on him. And then 3 minutes later, when it's back, you cast your cares on him. And you do it over and over and over and over. And pretty soon, it just becomes a habit. You just start casting your cares. It's the only way I know to do it. That's what Psalm 55 says, cast your cares on the Lord and he will sustain you. 1 Peter 5:7, cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. Cast it. You're not equipped to carry it. Some of you have terrible circumstances in your lives. Some of you are facing really, really hard things. You can't carry it. You're not qualified. You don't have the wherewithal to deal with it. Cast it. Let it go. Cast it, cast it, cast it over and over and over and over and over. Let him have it. He says, I'm the resurrection and I'm the life. The only way he can be the life is if we give it to him. One of my mentors, Dave McCarty, wrote this recently: no believer who feels pressure or stress believes in the total sovereignty of Jesus. It doesn't matter what we claim to believe about him and his sovereign reign over all. When we feel pressure or stress, we are unbelievers in his sovereignty. We have heaven, but are missing the benefit of Jesus. We're missing real life now. And those around us suffer too because of our self-absorption. You know this is true. When we're self-absorbed, everybody around us knows it because we're so focused. I got a PhD in this. I know all about this. My wife has a PhD in dealing with this. Cast your cares. I think this is what he's telling Mary or Martha. Martha, you just need me. Don't worry about Lazarus. See, Martha was the busy one. She was the worried one. She was the one that, remember the time that they were with, Jesus was in their home before, and Martha was running around trying to get stuff ready, and Mary was sitting at her feet. And Martha says, tell her to help me. I don't have anything ready. And Jesus says, well, she's chosen what is best. Martha, stop it. This is a word to our culture. We are the efficiency culture. We are the get it done culture. We are the go after it until you get it done. It doesn't matter how busy you are, you just got to get ahead. Go after it. And we live with more anxiety than we've ever lived with. All the studies show it. Suicide is up, anxiety is up, medication is up through the roof. And why is that? Because we are the anxious culture. And here's a word for us: I'm the resurrection and the life. You will live even though you die. Was his approach to Martha. How about Mary? His approach to Mary is a very, very different. He doesn't spout off doctrine. See, Mary loves being at his feet. She loves just sitting with him. She wants Jesus. That's what she wants. She believed that he was the one she needed. He didn't have to confront her with the truth. His way of showing compassion with her is totally different. And of course, Mary's approach is very different from Martha's and how she deals with Jesus. Funny thing is, they say the exact same thing. The first phrase that they use is exactly the same, but in a very different way. It says in verse 32, when Mary reached the place where Jesus was and saw him, the very first thing she did was fall at his feet. And then she says, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. Hers is anguish. And she comes and she falls at his feet. She worships him. And so how does Jesus react? Well, 33, when Jesus saw her weeping and the Jews would come along with her also weeping, he was deeply moved in spirit and troubled. It's all very interesting language in these verses. The word used for trouble and deeply moved is embryomai. Let's say it together. You can impress people at parties. My mom says, never talk about that. Don't talk about the Greek and all that. Don't apologize for the Greek and all that. She told me that last night. She was staying at our house. So, Mom, thank you for that. She's going to die right now, and I'll hear about it later. Embryomai. You know what the literal translation of that is? It says deeply troubled or moved in his spirit. You know what the literal translation? It's a snorting horse. Horses snort when they're angry, when there's trouble. This is how they communicate with each other. There's something wrong, and they get antsy and they start snorting. So Jesus is deeply moved in his spirit. What does it mean? Did he snort like a horse? No, he's furious. What? Why would he be furious? What is he angry about? Well, from the context, he's obviously angry at whatever is causing the sadness of his loved ones. What is it that's causing the sadness of his loved ones? It's death. He's angry with death. He's angry at this condition that has come into this world that he created, this condition known as death that makes people weep, and the sadness that comes with it. The sin that came in the world caused death. He's furious. And then it says Jesus wept. And we might think from that he got these crocodile tears and he welled up. That's such a wimpy way of putting it. Dakruo is the word here, and it means to weep. But here, there's two past, it's in the past tense. There's two past tenses in Greek. Just a quick little grammar lesson. The imperfect tense is an ongoing tense, something that happened in the past, ongoing in the past. And so if they had used that tense, you might have thought of it's a welling up or something that's a continual action that's happening. But they don't use that tense here. They use the aorist tense, which is a specific point in time. And all the commentaries are in agreement on this. Everybody agrees on this. It's the aorist tense. So if you combined this aorist word with his being furious, what does he do? He wails. He roars. He has this mix of compassion for Mary. He loves her so much. He hates seeing her sad. He roars. He's angry with death. And he wants to know where they've laid Lazarus because he's going to do something about this. And he does. What does our compassion look like? Is it accompanied by fierce anger? When you see a homeless person begging on the street, are you furious at a world that would allow this? Is it anger that moves us to action? So we see heartache all around us all the time. We see tragedy after tragedy on the news. We see homelessness. We see violence. Have we seen so much that we're blind to it as we fill our plates with another helping of stuffing and gravy? Brothers and sisters, compassion is not just a feeling in the stomach, though it is that. It's a feeling. It's an overwhelming feeling of compassion. It's not just some well-placed words, though that's important as well, to say things. But if it's not accompanied by action, it's not compassion. It's pity or something else. It's not compassion. See, this is an action fueled by anger at injustice, at poverty, at crime, at lack of opportunity. I could go on and on and on in our world. We can't be oblivious to it. We live in our suburbs. We can't be oblivious to it. Compassion for those who are hurting, for those who are grieving, for those who can't get themselves up, for those who need help. Compassion, it's a compassion that should be accompanied by anger that drives us to action, to do something about it. What does your compassion look like lately? Mine hasn't been that angry. In his book, One Man's Quest to Change the Way We Die, John Mullum tells this story. B.J. Miller was a sophomore at Princeton when one Monday night in November in 1990, he and two friends slipped out for drinks and then decided to climb a commuter train parked at the adjacent rail station for fun. When Miller got to the top, electrical current arced out of the piece of equipment into the watch on his wrist. 11,000 volts shot through his left arm and down his legs. And when his friends reached him on the roof of the train, smoke was rising from his feet. Miller remembers none of this. His memories don't kick in until several days later when he woke up in the burn unit of St. Barnabas Medical Center in Livingston, New Jersey. Doctors took each leg just below the knee, one at a time. Then they turned to his arm, which triggered in Miller an even deeper grief. And for weeks, the hospital staff considered him close to death. But Miller, in a devastated haze, didn't know that. He only worried about who he would be when he survived. For a long time, no visitors were allowed in his hospital room. The burn unit was a sterile environment. But on the morning Miller's arm was going to be amputated just below the elbow, he describes a moving scene of support and grace from his community of friends. A dozen friends and family members packed into a 10-foot-long corridor between the burn unit and the elevator just to catch a glimpse of him as he was rolled to surgery. They all dared to show up, Miller later said. They all dared to look at me. They were proving that I was lovable even when I couldn't see it. Here's the thing about Jesus. He showed up. He proves that we are lovable even though we don't see it. He came to Bethany to comfort Mary and Martha, and then he did something extraordinary. In his anger and at the pain of sin and death, he raises Lazarus from the dead. This is not happenstance, though. This is his very final miracle. What is he saying? It's symbolic that we will not be left in the grave. See, Jesus shows up at the house of Mary and Martha because he loves them, but it isn't the final stop in his destination. He's on his way somewhere. This is the week before he will give his life. He's on his way to Jerusalem. He stops in there to do this important miracle to show what will come, but he's on his way somewhere. He's on his way to give his life. See, the only way that Lazarus' resurrection could mean anything at all was that Jesus would have to actually conquer death. I mean, Lazarus may have been raised from the dead, but he was going to die again. And they were all lost. They were all lost. They had no hope. So what if he rises from the dead? Cool miracle, Jesus, but he's got no hope of going anywhere unless Jesus actually conquers death once and for all, and that's what he does. 1 week later he goes, they don't take his life, he hands his life, he lays his life down, and they crucify him in the most vile way. He gives his life for the sake of Lazarus, and for the sake of Mary and Martha, for the sake of his disciples, and for our sakes. The only way he can say I'm the resurrection and the life is if he goes and he conquers death. He had to do it. It's amazing to me that he would make these bold statements knowing what awaited him. That is a God worth following. He could have easily avoided the nightmare. Jesus showed up. He took our sorrow, he took our pain, he took our sin upon himself and died on a cross. But you know the story. God's power on the third day raised him from the dead to prove that he had been victorious over death. See, what we're claiming here is that a dead man rose. That a dead man rose. And what Jesus does with us, see, he doesn't come to tweak us. He doesn't even come to make us more compassionate. He doesn't come to fix our lives so that we're better people. No, what he does is he comes to make dead people alive. That's what he does. When he conquered death, he comes to make dead people alive. That's what Ephesians 2 says. By his grace. Maybe you're a skeptic here this morning and you have trouble believing in the resurrection. It's the most unique story ever told. It's what our faith rises and falls on. We're staking our lives on it. There's more evidence for the resurrection than there is for Julius Caesar. That's the truth. There's more historical evidence for it than some of the very well-known historical things that we hold and accept as real. At the very least, it deserves your investigation. If you're a Christ follower here this morning, why are you troubled? Why are you worried? Why do you live in fear? Why are your eyes just focused on your circumstances? Why are we just like Martha and have to get stuff done? And we run around, it's not really that important. Why do we take matters into our own hands? Do we know that Jesus is the resurrection and the life? He's the sovereign one and he's trustworthy. He proved this by being the weeping truth teller, the angry weeping truth teller that turned it into action and gave his life for us. Dave McCarty again. When we live independently as we do, we experience life under the curse, circumstance dependent for our joy and peace. We claim to be followers of Jesus, but we are followers of ourselves, self-reliant, trusting in lies. We have heaven, but we don't have the benefits of Jesus in daily living. And the Jesus in us is contagious to no one. I'm the resurrection and the life. And the life. It's the gospel and it changes everything. Let's pray. I'd like you to take a moment and engage and interact with what we're talking about here. If you're living a life of anxiety, perhaps you need to look at where your focus is. Are you focused on yourself? That's what anxiety and fear does to you. It's an overextended focus on ourselves. The what ifs of life. What if? What if this happens? What if that happens? What if I do this? What if I do that? What if this happens to me? And Jesus is saying, you're looking at the wrong thing. Look at me. I know the beginning from the end. Forget about your life. Accept what you are and cast it on me. Maybe you need to pray that prayer this morning. Maybe you don't know Jesus and you need to just come to him or ask him to come to you. Let me give you a moment just to pray where you are.